Months passed, and the once fragile bond between Arjun, Mira, and Vikram grew stronger with each passing day. The mansion, which had initially felt cold and unfamiliar to Arjun, began to transform into something resembling a home. With Vikram's permission, Arjun took charge of managing part of the estate, a role that gave him purpose and allowed him to stay close to Mira. He worked tirelessly, tending to the gardens, overseeing repairs, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of stability, as though life was finally giving him a chance to make amends. Mira, meanwhile, embarked on her journey toward healing. The treatments were challenging, long hours spent in hospitals, countless tests, and moments of uncertainty when progress seemed painfully slow. But through it all, she remained resilient, drawing strength from her father's unwavering support and Vikram's quiet encouragement. Arjun accompanied her to every appointment, holding her hand during procedures and cheering her on when setbacks tested her patience. "You're braver than anyone I know," he'd tell her often, his voice filled with pride. And though she couldn't see his smile, she could hear the love in his words. One crisp morning, after months of perseverance, the doctors delivered news that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Mira's sight was beginning to return. At first it was just faint shapes and blurry outlines, but over time, the world around her came into sharper focus. When she saw her father's face for the first time, the lines etched by years of hardship, the warmth in his eyes, the gentle curve of his smile, she cried tears of joy. "Papa, you look just like I imagined," she whispered, hugging him tightly. Arjun wept openly, overwhelmed by gratitude and relief. Vikram, too, played an integral role in their new beginning. Though he wasn't always present due to his business commitments, he ensured Mira had access to the best care and resources. On quieter evenings, he would join them for meals, sharing stories about his travels and encouraging Mira to dream bigger. "The world is vast," he told her one evening as they sat together under the stars. "And now that you can see it, there's nothing stopping you from exploring every corner." As the seasons changed, so did their lives. Arjun rebuilt not only his relationship with Mira, but also his self-worth. He no longer saw himself as a failure or a man defined by poor choices. Instead, he embraced the lessons those mistakes had taught him. Every sunrise reminded him of renewal, every sunset of gratitude. Even the villagers who had once judged him began to soften their stance, seeing how hard he worked to turn things around. For Mira, the world opened up in ways she had only dreamed of. She marveled at the colors of flowers, the intricate patterns of woven baskets, and the way sunlight danced on water. Her dreams of traveling didn't fade. In fact, they grew bolder. With Vikram's help, she enrolled in a school where she learned to read, write, and imagine possibilities far beyond the confines of her village. "Someday I'll visit the ocean," she declared one afternoon, her eyes sparkling with excitement, "and maybe even climb a mountain." Though scars remained, both visible and invisible, they served as reminders of the resilience that had carried them through their darkest days. Arjun often reflected on the night he had stormed into the mansion, consumed by anger and regret. That moment had been a turning point, forcing him to confront his flaws and fight for redemption. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. In the end, their story became one of hope and second chances, a testament to the power of forgiveness, trust, and unconditional love. As they stood together one evening, watching the horizon paint itself in shades of gold and crimson, Arjun wrapped an arm around Mira's shoulders. "We've come a long way, haven't we, Beta?" he said softly. Mira nodded, leaning into his embrace. "Yes, Papa. And this is just the beginning." The air in the grand hall softened as the storm outside finally began to relent. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the distant rumble of thunder faded into silence. Inside, the three figures stood suspended in a fragile moment of reckoning. Arjun kneeling on the cold marble floor, his tears mingling with Mira's gentle embrace, while Vikram observed from a few steps away, his presence looming yet oddly subdued. Vikram cleared his throat, breaking the quiet that had settled over them. "This doesn't have to end badly," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We can move forward if we choose to." Arjun raised his head slowly, his red-rimmed eyes meeting Vikram's steady gaze. For the first time since entering the mansion, he saw the man not as an adversary or a threat, but as someone who might genuinely want to help. Still, skepticism lingered in his heart. "Why are you doing this?" Arjun asked, his voice raw with emotion. "Why go through all this trouble for my daughter?" Vikram hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. Then, with a sigh, he replied, "Because I've seen what desperation does to people. I know what it's like to feel trapped, powerless to change your circumstances." He glanced at Mira briefly before continuing. "And because sometimes giving someone a chance is the most meaningful thing you can do." Mira, still holding on to her father, tilted her head slightly, sensing the sincerity in Vikram's tone. "Do you really think I can see again?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with cautious hope. "I believe so," Vikram answered, nodding even though she couldn't see him. "But it won't be easy. The treatments will take time, patience, and trust from all of us." Arjun felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Relief washed over him, knowing that Mira had a real opportunity to regain her sight, but guilt gnawed at him for having doubted Vikram's intentions. He turned to Mira, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Beta, forgive me," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "I was wrong to bring you here under false pretenses. I thought I was protecting you, but instead, I almost ruined everything." Mira smiled faintly, her fingers brushing away the tears streaking down his cheeks. "You're my papa," she whispered. "No matter what happens, I'll always love you. But promise me one thing. You'll stop blaming yourself. We're going to make things right, together." Her words struck a chord deep within Arjun, unraveling the knots of shame and regret that had bound him for so long. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I promise, Beta. No more running from my mistakes." Vikram stepped closer, extending a hand toward Arjun. "Then let's start fresh," he said. "You don't need to leave tonight, or ever, if you don't want to. There's plenty of work here, and you're welcome to stay close to Mira while she undergoes treatment. Consider it another chance." For a moment, Arjun hesitated, unsure whether to accept such an offer after everything that had transpired. But then he looked at Mira, her face glowing with quiet determination despite her blindness, and realized how much they both needed this second chance, not just for her sake, but for his own redemption. "Thank you," Arjun murmured, shaking Vikram's hand firmly. It wasn't just gratitude in his voice, it was a silent vow to rebuild the bridges he'd nearly burned down. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted subtly. The tension dissolved, replaced by a tentative sense of unity. Mira sat between her father and Vikram, listening intently as they discussed plans for her future. For the first time in days, Arjun felt a flicker of hope, a fragile flame, but enough to light the path ahead. Outside, the clouds parted, revealing a sliver of moonlight that streamed through the windows. It illuminated the room, casting soft shadows that seemed less menacing now. In that moment, Arjun understood. Life wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about finding the strength to weather them and emerge stronger on the other side. The tension in the grand hall of Vikram's mansion was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Arjun stood frozen, his trembling hand still clutching the weapon he had brought in blind desperation. The sight of Mira at the top of the stairs shattered whatever resolve he had left. His daughter's voice, soft, uncertain, yet filled with trust, cut through him like nothing else could. She didn't sound angry or scared. Instead, there was a quiet concern in her tone, as though she sensed her father's pain even before understanding it. "Papa, why are you here?" Mira asked again, taking a tentative step forward. Her hands reached out instinctively, feeling for the railing as she descended the staircase. Each step creaked faintly under her weight, echoing in the otherwise silent room. Arjun wanted to run to her, to pull her into his arms and beg forgiveness, but shame rooted him to the spot. He felt exposed, not just by the knife in his hand, but by the raw emotions tearing him apart. Vikram watched silently from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. For a man who had been moments away from confrontation, he now seemed oddly calm, almost detached. "Arjun," he finally said, his voice measured and firm, "put the knife down. This isn't helping anyone." But Arjun barely heard him. His focus was entirely on Mira, who was now halfway down the stairs. Lightning flashed outside, casting a brief glow over her face. Her brows were furrowed slightly, her lips parted as if trying to piece together what was happening. "Papa, I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why did you come here tonight?" Her words hit Arjun like a hammer blow. How could he explain himself without breaking her heart? How could he tell her that he had let fear and guilt drive him to this point, that he had doubted the very decision he'd forced upon her? Slowly, painfully, he dropped to his knees, lowering the knife to the floor with a dull clatter. Tears streamed down his cheeks, mingling with the rainwater that still soaked his clothes. "I'm sorry, Beta," he choked out, his voice barely audible. "I failed you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong." Mira hesitated for a moment, then continued down the stairs until she reached him. Kneeling beside her father, she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Papa, please talk to me," she urged softly. "What happened? Why are you crying?" Before Arjun could respond, Vikram stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Let me explain something," he said, addressing both father and daughter. His tone was calm but commanding, drawing their attention. "When I proposed this arrangement, it wasn't just about giving Mira the better life. It was also about offering her hope, for her future, for her dreams." He paused, glancing at Mira before turning back to Arjun. "I promised your daughter access to the finest doctors, treatments that might restore her sight. Did you know that?" Arjun's head snapped up, his tear-filled eyes locking onto Vikram's. "What? What are you saying?" he stammered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "I've already begun making arrangements," Vikram continued. "There's a renowned specialist in the city who specializes in advanced eye surgeries. With proper care and funding, there's a chance Mira could regain some, if not all, of her vision." For a moment, no one spoke. The storm outside raged on, but inside the mansion, time seemed to stand still. Arjun stared at Vikram, his mind reeling. All this time, he had assumed the businessman's intentions were purely transactional, another wealthy man indulging in charity, or worse. But now, hearing these words, he realized how blinded he had been by his own despair. He had let his fears cloud his judgment, leading him to doubt not only Vikram, but also himself. Mira's fingers tightened around her father's shoulder as she processed what had been said. "Is this true, Papa?" she asked quietly. "Could I really see again?" Arjun swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Yes, Beta," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's possible, but I should have trusted you enough to tell you myself. Instead, I let my mistakes push us apart." Tears glistened in Mira's unseeing eyes as she leaned forward, wrapping her arms around her father. "Don't cry, Papa," she murmured. "We'll fix this together. You're not alone." As they embraced, the storm outside began to subside, its fury giving way to a softer patter of rain. Vikram stepped back, watching the scene unfold with an inscrutable expression. Whether his actions stemmed from genuine kindness or calculated generosity remained unclear, but one thing was certain. The bond between father and daughter had weathered the worst of the storm and emerged stronger than ever. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging within Arjun. Rain lashed against the windows of his small home, and thunder cracked like a whip across the sky, yet none of it compared to the chaos swirling in his mind. Hours had passed since Mira left, but every second felt heavier than the last. The house was suffocatingly silent, save for the rhythmic patter of raindrops on the roof. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in on him, accusing him of abandoning his daughter. Arjun paced back and forth, his thoughts spiraling out of control. Images of Meera sitting alone in Vikram's mansion haunted him, her trembling hands clutching the edge of an unfamiliar bed, her wide, unseeing eyes searching for a familiar voice that wasn't there. What if she was scared? What if Vikram wasn't the man he claimed to be? Doubt gnawed at Arjun like a relentless beast, feeding off his guilt and fear. The more he thought about it, the more unbearable the idea of losing her became. Then something inside him snapped. With trembling hands, Arjun grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter, the same one he used to cut vegetables or carve wood, and shoved it into the waistband of his trousers. His movements were frantic, fueled by desperation and alcohol-fueled rage. He didn't know exactly what he planned to do, only that he couldn't sit idly by while his daughter faced an uncertain future. If Vikram wouldn't return her willingly, then Arjun would take matters into his own hands, even if it meant confronting the wealthy businessman head-on. The journey to Vikram's mansion was treacherous under the howling storm. Mud clung to Arjun's worn sandals with each step, slowing him down, but nothing could deter him. Lightning illuminated the path ahead in brief flashes, casting eerie shadows over the barren landscape. The mansion loomed in the distance, its towering silhouette framed by jagged streaks of lightning. To Arjun, it looked less like a home and more like a fortress, impenetrable and cold. As he approached the gates, soaked to the bone, and shivering uncontrollably, Arjun pounded on the iron bars with clenched fists. "Open up," he shouted, his voice hoarse and raw. "I need to see my daughter." A guard emerged cautiously, peering through the rain at the disheveled figure before him. "What do you want?" the man demanded gruffly. "I'm here for Meera," Arjun growled, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Tell Vikram I'm not leaving until I see her." After a tense moment, the guard reluctantly unlocked the gate and escorted Arjun inside. The opulence of the mansion hit him immediately. Gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers dripping with light, and gilded furniture that seemed to mock his poverty. Every detail screamed wealth, a stark contrast to the crumbling life he'd left behind. But Arjun barely noticed. His focus was singular. All he cared about was finding Meera. Vikram appeared moments later, descending the grand staircase with measured steps. Dressed impeccably in a silk robe, he exuded calm authority, even as Arjun stormed toward him. The knife now gripped tightly in his hand. "Where is she?" Arjun demanded, his voice shaking with anger and desperation. "Where's my daughter?" Vikram raised an eyebrow, unfazed by the display of hostility. "Calm yourself, Arjun," he said smoothly. "Your daughter is safe upstairs. She's resting after a long day." "Resting?" Arjun spat, taking another step forward. "Or locked away because you don't want her running back to me." Vikram sighed, shaking his head slightly. "You misunderstand. I have no intention of harming Meera. Everything I've done has been for her benefit." "For her asterisk benefit," Arjun shot back, his grip tightening on the knife. "You think buying her makes this okay. You think money fixes everything." Before Vikram could respond, a soft voice interrupted them. "Papa." Both men turned to see Meera standing hesitantly at the top of the stairs, her delicate frame silhouetted by the dim hallway lights. Her blind eyes stared straight ahead. Yet somehow, she seemed to sense the tension in the room. "Is that you, Papa?" she asked again, her voice tinged with worry. Arjun froze, the knife slipping slightly in his grasp. Seeing Meera, knowing she was unharmed, was both a relief and a dagger to his heart. How could he explain himself to her now? How could he justify the terror he must have caused? Tears welled up in his eyes as he lowered the knife, his resolve crumbling faster than he'd anticipated. "Meera," he choked out, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." In that moment, the storm outside seemed to fade into the background. The mansion, once intimidating and alien, now felt smaller, quieter. The only thing that mattered was the fragile bond between father and daughter, and whether it could survive the weight of Arjun's terrible mistake. The wedding took place on a moonless night, shrouded in shadows that seemed to echo the heaviness of Arjun's heart. There were no vibrant decorations, no lively music, and certainly no celebration. The entire affair felt more like a transaction than a union, hurriedly arranged under the cover of darkness, as if trying to hide it from prying eyes, or perhaps from judgment. A few villagers had gathered reluctantly, their faces etched with unease. Some whispered behind cupped hands, while others simply looked away, unable to meet Arjun's gaze. Meera stood beside Vikram, her small frame draped in a simple sari borrowed from a neighbor. It wasn't the elaborate gown one might expect for such an occasion, but she wore it with quiet dignity. Her hands trembled slightly as they clutched a garland of marigolds, its bright orange petals glowing faintly in the dim light of lanterns strung haphazardly around the makeshift altar. Though her expression remained calm, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her unseeing eyes, a silent question about what lay ahead. Arjun stood nearby, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He tried to focus on the priest's chanting, the rhythmic rise and fall of Sanskrit verses meant to bless the couple, but the words blurred together like distant echoes. Instead, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat and the soft rustle of Meera's breathing beside him. Every time she turned toward him, seeking reassurance, he forced himself to nod or offer a weak smile, though inside he felt like crumbling into pieces. When the moment came for the exchange of garlands, Vikram stepped forward confidently, slipping the floral loop over Meera's head with practiced ease. She hesitated before reciprocating, her fingers brushing against Vikram's chest as she placed the garland around his neck. The touch sent a shiver through her, not out of affection, but out of the unfamiliarity of it all. This man was practically a stranger, yet here they were, bound together by vows she didn't fully understand. After the ceremony concluded, Vikram wasted no time. With polite nods to the sparse crowd, he guided Meera toward a waiting car parked outside the village square. Its sleek black exterior gleamed under the pale glow of headlights, a stark contrast to the dusty paths and weathered homes surrounding it. As Meera climbed into the vehicle, her hand instinctively reached for Arjun's. For a brief second, their fingers intertwined, and she whispered, "Will I see you soon, Papa?" Arjun's throat tightened, making it impossible to speak. All he could manage was a stiff nod, though tears threatened to spill down his cheeks. Then, with a final glance at her father, Meera settled into the seat, clutching her folded hands tightly in her lap. The car door closed with a dull thud, sealing her off from the only world she'd ever known. As the engine roared to life and the car pulled away, leaving trails of dust swirling in its wake, Arjun stood rooted to the spot. The sound of gravel crunching beneath tires faded into silence, replaced by the eerie stillness of the night. Villagers began dispersing slowly, some casting sympathetic glances in Arjun's direction, others muttering prayers under their breath. But none stayed long enough to witness the weight of his despair. Alone now, Arjun stared at the empty road where the car had disappeared. The lantern swayed gently in the breeze, casting flickering shadows that danced mockingly across the ground. His mind raced with images of Meera sitting nervously in that grand mansion, surrounded by strangers who would never truly know her like he did. Would she cry tonight? Would she feel abandoned? And most painfully, would she ever forgive him? With slow, heavy steps, Arjun made his way back to their tiny home. Each creak of the wooden door, each rustle of fabric hanging limply on hooks, reminded him of Meera's absence. The house felt eerily silent without her humming, or the soft shuffle of her feet moving from room to room. Even the basket she'd been weaving sat unfinished on the table, its loose reeds curling inward like unanswered questions. Sinking onto the edge of his cot, Arjun buried his face in his hands. The guilt that had been gnawing at him for days now consumed him entirely. Outside, the wind howled mournfully, as if mourning the loss alongside him. Sleep eluded him that night, Instead, he replayed every memory of Mira, the laughter, the stories, the trust she placed in him, wondering if he had just betrayed the very person who needed him most. Mira's days were simple, yet they carried a quiet magic that only she could see. Though her world was shrouded in darkness, it was alive with sounds, smells, and textures that painted vivid pictures in her mind. Every morning, she would wake up to the soft chirping of sparrows outside her window, their melodies weaving stories in her head. She imagined them as tiny travelers, hopping from branch to branch, sharing secrets about faraway lands. To Mira, life wasn't limited by what she couldn't see. It was enriched by what she could feel. Her favorite activity was sitting under the old banyan tree near their house, weaving baskets from reeds her father collected for her. Her fingers moved deftly, twisting and turning the thin strands into intricate patterns. Each basket was unique, born out of her imagination and the rhythm of her hands. Sometimes, neighbors would stop by to admire her work, marveling at how someone who had never seen a basket could create such beauty. "You've got a gift, Mira," they'd say, patting her shoulder affectionately. And though she couldn't see their smiles, she could hear the warmth in their voices. Despite her blindness, Mira had dreams bigger than anyone in the village could fathom. She often asked Arjun questions about the world beyond their small home. "What does the ocean look like, Papa?" she'd ask, tilting her head curiously. "Is it as big as the sky? Or do mountains really touch the clouds?" Arjun would do his best to describe these wonders, using words that danced between reality and imagination. He told her about vast blue waters stretching endlessly, towering peaks kissed by snow, and bustling cities filled with lights brighter than stars. Mira listened intently, her face lighting up as if she could picture every detail. But there was one dream that stood above all others: to travel the world someday. She wanted to feel the spray of the ocean on her skin, climb hills covered in wildflowers, and walk through markets brimming with spices and laughter. "One day, I'll go everywhere," she declared confidently, clutching a half-finished basket in her hands. "I'll let my ears guide me, and my heart will show me the way." Arjun loved listening to her talk about her dreams, even though guilt gnawed at him whenever he realized how impossible they seemed. How could he ever give her the life she deserved when they barely had enough to survive? Yet he always encouraged her, telling her she was destined for greatness. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Mira," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion. "If anyone can make those dreams come true, it's you." When Arjun finally sat down to tell Mira about Vikram's proposal, his heart sank like a stone in water. He chose a quiet moment after dinner, when the evening breeze whispered through the trees and the crickets sang their nightly song. Taking her hands in his, he began carefully, choosing each word with painstaking precision. "Mira, Beta, something has happened," he said, his voice trembling. "A man, a very rich man, wants to take care of you. He says he can give you everything you've ever dreamed of." Mira tilted her head, her brow furrowing slightly. "Take care of me? What do you mean, Papa?" Arjun swallowed hard, avoiding her unseeing gaze. "He wants to marry you, Mira. He'll take you to his home, where you'll live like a queen. You'll have food, clothes, servants, everything." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Mira spoke, her voice steady but tinged with confusion. "But why would he want to marry me? He doesn't even know me." "He believes in you, Beta," Arjun replied, though the lie tasted bitter on his tongue. "He thinks you're special, just like I do." Mira hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her unfinished basket. "Will you come with me, Papa?" Arjun's chest tightened. "Not right away, Beta, but you'll be safe, I promise. And maybe this is your chance to live the life you've always wanted." Though doubt lingered in her voice, Mira nodded slowly, trusting her father implicitly. "If you think it's best, Papa, then I'll go," she said softly. "But I'll miss you." Tears welled up in Arjun's eyes as he pulled her into a tight embrace. In that moment, he felt both proud and broken. proud of her courage, but shattered by the knowledge that he was sending her away because of his own failures. As he held her close, he vowed silently to himself that no matter what happened, he would find a way to make things right. The next morning, Arjun woke up with a heavy heart. The offer Vikram had made weighed on him like a boulder he couldn't push aside. He tried to focus on his daily chores, feeding the chickens, fixing the broken fence, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation in the tavern. Every time he pictured Mira living in a grand mansion, dressed in fine clothes and surrounded by people who could care for her, a flicker of hope sparked inside him. But then guilt would rush in, drowning that hope under waves of shame. How could he even consider selling his own daughter? That afternoon, as Mira sat outside their small house weaving baskets, humming softly to herself, Arjun watched her from a distance. She was so innocent, so trusting. Her blindness hadn't stopped her from finding joy in the simplest things, the rustling of leaves, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the sound of birds chirping. To her, the world was still full of wonder, untouched by the harsh realities that plagued her father. Arjun felt a lump rise in his throat. How could he explain this decision to her? Would she ever forgive him? Later that evening, Arjun returned to the tavern, hoping to find Vikram again. This time, he wasn't seeking advice or comfort. He wanted answers. When Vikram arrived, dressed impeccably as always, Arjun wasted no time getting straight to the point. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Why do you want to marry my daughter?" Vikram smiled, leaning back in his chair with an air of calm confidence. "Let's just say I see potential where others might not," he replied smoothly. "Your daughter is special, Arjun, and I have the means to give her a life she deserves, one you can't provide." Arjun hesitated, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "But what about love? Shouldn't marriage be based on love?" Vikram chuckled softly, as if amused by the question. "Love isn't always practical, my friend. Sometimes, it's enough to offer security, stability, and opportunity. Isn't that what every parent wants for their child?" His words struck a chord deep within Arjun. Wasn't that exactly what he wanted for Mira? A chance at a better life, free from the struggles they faced every day. Still, doubt lingered. What will people say? Arjun muttered, more to himself than to Vikram. "They'll call me a monster." "They won't understand," Vikram said firmly. "But you'll know why you did it. You'll know you gave her a future worth fighting for." As the night wore on, Vikram laid out the details of the agreement. He promised a substantial sum of money up front, enough to clear Arjun's debts and leave him with a comfortable cushion. In return, Mira would become his wife, moving into his sprawling estate far from the village. There were no lengthy contracts, no formalities, just a handshake and a promise. Arjun knew he should feel uneasy about how easy it all seemed, but desperation clouded his judgment. Before leaving the tavern, Vikram added one final reassurance. "You'll see her again, Arjun. I'm not taking her away forever. Think of this as a new beginning, for both of you." Walking home under the pale light of the moon, Arjun wrestled with his emotions. On one hand, relief washed over him at the thought of finally being free from debt. On the other hand, guilt gnawed at him like a persistent ache. He told himself over and over that this was for Mira's sake, that she deserved more than he could ever give her. Yet, the image of her smiling face haunted him, reminding him of the bond they shared. When he reached home, Mira was waiting for him. "Papa, is everything okay?" she asked, sensing something was wrong. Arjun forced a smile, kneeling beside her and placing a hand on her shoulder. "Everything will be fine, Beta," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I promise." That night, as Arjun lay awake staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to take a leap he might never recover from. But Vikram's words echoed in his ears. Asterisk, a new beginning asterisk for better or worse. Arjun had made his choice. In a quiet village surrounded by dry, cracked earth and endless fields, there lived a man named Arjun. He was once known as a hard-working farmer with dreams of prosperity, but life had other plans for him. Years of drought and poor harvests left his land barren, and debts piled up faster than he could repay them. His hands, once strong and calloused from years of toil, now trembled not just from exhaustion, but from the constant fear of losing everything. Arjun's wife, Priya, had been the light of his life, her laughter echoing through their tiny home even during the toughest times. But fate cruelly snatched her away after a brief illness, leaving behind an empty house filled only with memories. And their young daughter, Meera. Meena was born blind, yet she possessed a spirit so radiant it seemed to brighten even the darkest corners of their lives. She loved listening to birds chirping in the morning, feeling the texture of leaves, and imagining stories based on the sounds around her. To Arjun, she wasn't just his child. She was his reason to keep going, no matter how bleak things became. But survival wasn't easy. Every day felt like a battle against forces far greater than himself. Creditors pounded on his door, demanding payment. Neighbors whispered behind his back, calling him unlucky or cursed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier with each passing sunrise. Some nights, Arjun would sit alone under the stars, staring at the vast sky above, wondering if anyone truly understood the storm raging inside him. How could he protect Meera when he couldn't even feed her properly? One evening, seeking solace, or perhaps escape, Arjun wandered into the local tavern. It was a dimly lit place where men drowned their sorrows in cheap liquor and exchanged tales of misfortune. As he sat nursing a glass of whiskey, a stranger approached him. This man was unlike anyone Arjun had ever met. Dressed in expensive clothes, exuding confidence, he introduced himself as Vikram, a wealthy businessman visiting the village. Vikram listened intently as Arjun poured out his troubles, the failed crops, mounting debts, and the overwhelming burden of raising a blind daughter alone. When Arjun finished speaking, Vikram leaned closer, his voice calm but persuasive. "I can help you," he said. At first, Arjun thought Vikram meant offering financial aid or some form of charity. But then came the offer that froze his blood. Vikram wanted to marry Meera. In exchange, he promised Arjun enough money to clear all his debts and start anew. The room spun around Arjun as he processed the words. Marry off his own daughter. To a stranger. The very idea made his stomach churn. Yet, as Vikram described the luxurious life Meera would lead, servants tending to her every need, access to the finest doctors, education beyond anything Arjun could provide, a dangerous seed of temptation took root in his mind. Wasn't this what parents did? Sacrifice everything for their children's well-being. That night, as Arjun walked home beneath a sky heavy with clouds, his heart warred between love and desperation. Could he really give up his daughter, the one person who still believed in him despite all his failures? Or was letting her go the greatest act of love he could offer? These questions swirled in his head, haunting him long after he lay down to sleep. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would change their lives forever.